I'm Gary Bembridge of Tips for Travelers. I'm going to tell you 8 things the brochures don't tell you about going on an Alaska cruise that I think you really need to know. The first thing you need to know is about the weather. It's likely to rain. The Alaska cruise season runs from May to September, and the real peak of the rain is right in the busiest time. So assume if you go to Alaska that it's going to rain. Places like Ketchikan, for example, they have over 300 days a year of rain. So don't let that put you off. They're used to running tours. They're used to dealing with travelers arriving and it's going to be raining, so they can run the tours in the rain. But just make sure that you are prepared with what you pack, what you bring, and what you wear out to go on excursions. Do not let that put you off. It is still absolutely magnificent and doesn't necessarily rain all day, every day. The second thing you need to know is you will be spending a lot of time on the ship. So if you go on, for example, an Inside Passage cruise, there are 2 sea days. There's also going to be at least 1 full day of cruising through something like Glacier Bay in that 7 days. So there's quite a lot of time spent on the ship. Now, of course, the cruise lines know this and they build in lots of activities. Now, the great news is the scenery pretty much at all times of cruising is phenomenal. So you do have lots to look at. The other thing you need to know is going to Alaska, it's incredibly busy. So there are at least 29 ships in a season cruising Alaska. Over 1.3 million people will cruise to Alaska in that period, May to September. So whichever port you go to, you're likely to have 4 or 5 ships. So there's going to be anything between 10,000 and 15,000 passengers. Now bear in mind, if you take a place like Skagway, which is one of the most popular places to stop, they only have a summertime population of about 1,200 people. The ports, they're used to this, and actually it doesn't feel that crowded once you're there, because once the ships arrive, people are off on excursions, and a lot of the excursions are heading off on float planes, they're heading off on boats to go whale watching, so they disperse quite quickly. Don't let that put you off, because what you see is phenomenal, and once you head off on your excursion, it's going to feel much less crowded and much less busy, because there are huge amounts of excursions. The fourth thing you need to know is if you really want to go out and see things in Alaska, excursions can be pretty expensive because they do involve relatively expensive activities, whether it's ships and boats going out to go whale watching, whether it's helicopters taking you to hiking on glaciers. Let me give you some examples. A phenomenal dog sleighing excursion by helicopter can cost you as much as $640. Whale watching, over $150. If you want to go on the magnificent White Pass and Yukon Railway, which most people do, in a standard class, it's going to cost you about $130. If you go in the luxury, it's going to cost you over $300. So you've got your fare of getting you to Alaska, but it's going to cost you a lot if you really want to experience Alaska. The fifth thing is about visiting Glacier Bay. Now, Glacier Bay is a magnificent 5-mile inlet. It has some of the most important and beautiful glaciers. However, only 2 cruise ships are allowed in per day. So a lot of the cruise lines do not head into Glacier Bay because they just can't get in. Take a look for a cruise line and itinerary that's going to take you to Glacier Bay. So for example, I went with Holland America, which has been traveling in Alaska for over 70 years, and they take you into Glacier Bay. Clearly the cruise lines or itineraries that don't go to Glacier Bay are not going to tell you that you're missing out on something magical. The next thing I think as a watch out is souvenirs. Overall, personally, I was quite disappointed with the souvenirs, as I felt they were not that inspired and they weren't as authentic as I'd like them to be. Now, there are 2 things that you need to look for if you're buying souvenirs, one of which is the bear logo. This means that it's made in Alaska, or there's a hand logo, which means that it's authentic handcraft by the indigenous population. Do look for those 2 logos, because it does mean that it's likely to be more authentic and not made in China or whatever. The 7th thing to know about is Wi-Fi and connectivity is not that great. On cruise ships, Wi-Fi can be relatively expensive, but certainly once you get to the various ports, you will not find lots of free Wi-Fi places everywhere. There are little pockets of it, and certainly once you get to Skagway, it's almost non-existent. Even the one free Wi-Fi at the library is atrocious. Your phone connection may be a little bit erratic because of all the mountains. Bear in mind that for that week that you're on your Alaska cruise, you are going to be relatively disconnected. The 8th thing that I want to talk about, which they don't really warn you about, is if you're going your Alaska cruise out of Vancouver, you then, of course, are heading from Canada into the United States, and actually passing through the whole immigration is quite a long and laborious process and quite slow, because on any one day in Vancouver you've probably got 2 or 3 ships boarding. So one of the things I recommend you do as a way of getting around that is actually try and check in a little bit later. towards the end of the day, obviously making sure you're in plenty of time before your cruise closes. Then hopefully some of the lines have gone down. So those are the 8 things that I think that the brochures don't tell you about Alaska that you do need to know. Going to Alaska is absolutely magnificent. At least by knowing these 8 things, you can plan, be prepared, and make much more of your Alaska experience. If you enjoyed this video, what I'd like you to do is to watch many more of my Tips for Travelers videos. I have lots of videos about Alaska and other travel topics, and you'll get much more travel inspiration, advice, and tips.